Hi everybody and good afternoon. Happy to kick off this panel. We call it Operate in Vietnam, Sell Globally. Also want to give you a quick background of why we actually developed this panel. So a quick background story about me. I'm also Ovi, like many of you here today. I'm born in Denmark. One of the first things you learn in business school in Denmark is how to build a business that are not meant for your local market. It's a population of not even 6 million people. So the business that build a lot of entrepreneurship are built for markets, near markets, but also markets overseas. So I think today we have 3 esteemed panelists here, all business leaders, industry leaders today, gonna share about their story, their business model. But to make it a little bit different, I would like to kick off first with 3 quick facts about each panelist. And then they of course get the opportunity to share a bit more about the business. So maybe starting with Howard. So Howard is a Kiwi, as we call it, born in New Zealand, but today is leading one of the fastest growing tech hub in Vietnam. He have extensive experience internationally, more than 10 years in the UK and almost 20 years in Australia, and is now leading NAB Innovation Center Vietnam. Howard is actually a trained mathematician, but today have grown into more product and business role. So please give a big applause for Howard. And then we have Mark on the right side. So Mark Nam Hansen is the managing director of a company called Studio CSS. So he will tell you a bit more about it afterward. Personally, I also know Mark. He's also Danish as me. Some of the quick facts that I would like to bring in is that Mark's company was just awarded 1 out of 20 FDIs, so a big award by the Vietnamese government by VCCI, Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mark is actually born in Vietnam, adopted to Denmark, and then came back to Vietnam knowing no Vietnamese. He today uses Vietnamese both privately and in business as well. And he's leading a company in Bình Dương. So I think some of us spoke about Bình Dương before, up to almost 1,000 employers today. And is part of 4th generation of a world-renowned company called Carl Hansen & Son from Denmark. So please give a big applause to Mark as well. And then we have Stephen. So Stephen is not only the co-founder of Lumiere Education, he's a Harvard graduate from Harvard Business School. He's a PhD student. Stephen is actually also, beside being an entrepreneur today, he's a Vietnamese comedian. So I said in Vietnamese for the comedy group Psychondale. He just had an episode on our BizFF channel as well, part of our Vietnam Innovator ecosystem, only in Vietnamese. So if you want to learn Vietnamese, I think it's a good opportunity to listen in. And Stephen is also leading a company with plus 10 million revenue today and have more than 3,000 students globally. So give a big applause to Stephen as well. So I think next is also for you to understand a bit more about the business model, about the panelists that we have today. So starting with Howard, 3 minutes, a bit about yourself and the business that you're leading today, please.
So I'll talk about our business. So we are a tech business here in Vietnam. So NAB Innovation Center Vietnam. We have over 1,600 employees, software engineers and security specialists. Our staff are 99% either Vietnamese or overseas Vietnamese. And our business model is actually pretty straightforward. Like any software engineering or software services company, we build software solutions, but we are a standalone, separate Vietnamese company. So we have our own board and member council here in Vietnam, but we are wholly owned by an Australian bank, which is NAB, which is last time I looked, I think the 21st largest bank in the world. And so there are 100% owner and they're also our only customer. But our business model is we build software solutions for that bank, apps, all kinds of products and services that they then use in Australia. We obviously charge them a markup. So my business is to hire talented people, pay them well, charge a little bit extra back to Australia, and then continue to invest and grow in the business here.
And maybe just a quick follow-up. So can you also share to the audience today how many employees that you have today and how long time you've been in Vietnam?
So we started with a small build, operate, transfer operator and then took full ownership in 2022. So we have been around, this will be our third year of operation. And so this time last year we had just under 1,000 people. We now have 1,600. This time next year we'll have over 2,000. So we have a very ambitious growth journey.
Amazing. Okay, thank you, Howard. I think next, Mark, can you also give a little bit of background about yourself, but also the company that you're leading today in Benio?
Sure. Hi guys, I'm Mark. The difference between me and all of you, maybe I'm adopted. Originally, I'm also here from Vietnam. I'm from the north. I got adopted to Denmark in 1999 by Danish parents. So I grew up since I was 7 in a very, very traditional Danish parents. So for me, Vietnam is still a foreigner country for me, even though I'm a Vietnamese look. So I study engineering and management in Denmark with one of my friends. He's actually sitting here in the building, Trung. And the reason why I actually come to Vietnam is due to we have a big company in Denmark, and I am the next in the line, as David told to begin with, the fourth generation. So I need to prove myself that I, can do something. So I decided to move to Vietnam to challenge myself. And I knew nothing about Vietnam because I am adopted. So about under engineering, my training, I decided to go to the south because I'm from the north, and we know all about the history about Vietnam. So I put myself in a foreigner environment, know nothing about culture, found a Danish company, and then I jumped into it, could not speak Vietnamese, but I got forced to speak Vietnamese because most of the Vietnamese here, local, cannot speak English. So that's how I learned. And then it ended up 1 year later, my dad, he bought the company here. Globally, we are operating all over the world. And this company here is in Bình Dương province, about 40-something kilometers from here. And it's 100% Danish owned. So we went from before COVID to have about 2,000 employees. And to after COVID, we reduced all of our customers, and then we only keep like a handful. After then, we make a strategy change. So instead of we only make outdoor, then now we make indoor and outdoor high-end. So for that change, we need to change everything: the people, the supplier change, the customer base. So yeah.
Amazing, Mark. And moving on to Stephen, can you tell a bit more about yourself and the companies that you actually started today? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just a little bit on myself. I am in the overseas Vietnamese. I am just the overseas. So I'm obviously some white guy, but I'm very dedicated to Vietnam. I have always lived my life in the in-between, and I'm sure many of you guys feel that way. I'm American. I grew up in Missouri, but I also lived a big part of my life in parts of Asia. I lived in Singapore and Hong Kong. I went to public school in Taiwan for a year. I wore if you ever seen like a Taiwanese drama, a high school drama, I was like one of those boys in the uniforms for a year. So I always lived in between places. After college, I worked at McKinsey for a few years, 1 year in the US, 1 year in China. And before then, I come to Vietnam to study Vietnamese, kind of just for fun. I thought it'd be fun to learn a new language. And for me, those few months in Vietnam were just like, just really transformative for me. There's this great phrase in Vietnamese, which I really felt when I left, which is "Khi ta ở nơi đất nước ở, khi ta đi đất đai hoa tâm hồn," which it just means that it's this Che Lang Ving quote, and it just means that when you're there, it's just the place you are, but when you leave, it becomes a part of your heart, and that's just how I felt about Vietnam. And So I worked for McKinsey for a few years in the US and China, but I just kept on thinking about Vietnam, and eventually moved back in 2019. And so I worked for Fulbright University first, and then in 2020 I started this company, Lumiere. And Lumiere is also, I think, reflective of my identity, as I know many founders feel that way, that it's kind of an extension of who you are. It's a education company. My dad's professor. I grew up really committed to education. We operate really globally, but our team is mainly based in Asia. So we have a team in Vietnam, we have a team in China, in India, in the Philippines, but about half of our students are now in the US. And so I'm happy to talk about that. I think there's a huge opportunity, particularly for people who grew up outside of Vietnam, to think about how can I target potentially even bigger markets outside of Vietnam, but still build something here. And many of what we do is just exactly that, just standing in the in-between, between Asia and the US, between Vietnam and the US. A lot of how I live my life and how we build Lumiere. Very quickly on Lumiere, just so you have it, it's super nerdy. If you think of like an ambitious high school student who's trying to study in the US, they're often thinking about how they can build up what they're doing to be more successful when applying to college. We essentially we run and acquire companies that provide kind of additional experiences like research programs, internships for them, so they become more competitive. So it's this like grindy student who wants to do even more to get into a best school. That's kind of our customer base, and of course, their parents. So
great, Stephen. And I know that we will dig a lot more in details about the different companies. So let us dig into the first question, also a bit more into the main topic today. So what strategies have you found most effective for entering and establish a presence in these international markets, but while operating from Vietnam? Maybe I would like to start with Mark. So can you share a bit more to the audience your thoughts on this, but also some of the international markets that you're in today?
Sorry. Yeah, sure. For us, I told you we operate under our mother company. So the quickest story for why we bought this company is when I came here, the company only made outdoor furniture, and our mother company, we didn't knew anything about outdoor furniture. We only do high-end furniture. So the only the way you gain quick access or knowledge into a new field is you buy a company, and which we did. So that's how we did it. And the other thing is the strategy we did is to keep producing the furniture here in Vietnam, is to leveraging the Vietnam's competitive advantage. And here you have, for example, cost effective, and you have young labor skills, where you have average age is about 32 and a half. And then you also have a relatively, in our province, the land is flat, so you don't have flooding, you don't have natural disaster, you don't have hurricanes and so on. So that's make it an attractive place for us to be. For us in the market is we have flex stores around the world, and we are in key locations like Singapore, New York, London. We also have in all over Europe, Munich, London, Milan, Copenhagen, and so on. So we are present in most of the country where you have the taste for high-end furniture. In Vietnam, we are not present. In China, we are not. Yeah, and what else?
Yeah, that's super, Mark. I think we would dig a bit more in depth later about actually some of the other products that you develop beside the furnitures. Stephen, maybe you can share with the audience some of the strategies that you found effective from the Lumiere education, but also how it is to operate from Vietnam, but actually service globally today.
Yeah, so the way that I think about it is, I fundamentally think that our strategy to get customers and our strategy to build a team are just two different things. That's how I approach it. So we do operate in Vietnam. We do have students in Vietnam, but we're this for our company, we're so stupid and niche, of these really nerdy, ambitious students. there's maybe 50 a year in Vietnam who might be a good fit. So we really need to think of it separately. So when we're targeting students, that's really, I think, that's like any startup. We're trying to figure out, okay, what are the channels to get there? How do we make the product more attractive? How do we improve margins? We're totally bootstrapped, so we think a lot about that. But then on the talent side, I spent a lot of my time thinking about the talent. I'm sure that's true as well for Howard as well. And there, I think that personally, I spent a lot of time just being aggressive, telling people that they should work with me and we should do stuff together. So whenever I find someone talented, I'll just be like, hey, what are you doing? Do you want a new job? I'm sure I may have done it to some of you guys today. Maybe you should consider working with us. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. I'm pretty public on LinkedIn as well. But I find that if you are looking for global talent, places like Vietnam, places like India as well, there are so many talented people. And if you can provide a great culture to work in, it's a really distinct advantage, because people, like many people here today, in my experience at least so far, are looking for autonomy. They're looking for people that they like. They're looking for places to grow and learn. And it's actually not that hard to provide that if you get good people, trust them, and give them big opportunities. And so that's what we do. And I'm just really loud about saying, hey, I'm trying to hire really good people. And so if you're excited, please join. Actually, I think one person here, Jimmy, just is joining on Monday. I don't know if Jimmy's around, but he's the man. And that really came about because of just being public and saying, hey, we're looking for great people in Vietnam.
Super, Stephen and Howard, as the General Director of NAB Vietnam, can you tell us a bit about why the in-source model that you have today are so important for your customers, let's say in Australia, but also what the advancement of growth, or how you contribute to the advancement of growth of tech talents in Vietnam?
Well, I think, David, it's great that you use the word insourcing, because I think the reason why we're here in Vietnam is almost the opposite of outsourcing. So if you sort of wind the clock back, 7-8 years ago, our shareholder, our customer, the big bank in Australia, in common with a lot of banks globally, I think was very reliant on outsourced providers for its tech build, the IBMs of this world. And so we had this very disparate organization where 70% of our tech workforce was from vendors and suppliers. And, the strategy for building in Vietnam is an insourcing strategy. It's to say that we want to really invest in talent here. And I think we get sort of two benefits to sort of answer your question. We get a much deeper understanding of our customer because we're employing people directly, and we can invest in them understanding our customer. But we also get the benefit of the curiosity and the growth and the intellectual power in this market. And that's, one of the reasons why we chose Vietnam. We've heard from lots of speakers this morning, about the fantastic STEM education, the fantastic talent pool here. And, we see that each and every day. So, the reason why we've been able to grow so strongly and serve our customer well is because of the talent here. And it's because we've effectively insourced our tech operation to say, no, we're only going to have our own employees doing tech. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. And we just happen to have chosen India, Vietnam, and Australia. And what we're finding is the talent in Vietnam is like surpassing all of our expectations. It's really extraordinary.
Amazing, Howard. And also just want to give a quick note about NAB and the business model they have. It's very rare to have that in Vietnam. There's not many global organizations that build that type of in-sourcing hub, either in tech or in other industries. So,
no other bank has done it. There are a couple of other industries that have done it, but I often say this, I'm surprised that we still remain the only financial services company with a tech global capability center here in Vietnam. I'm sure others will follow over the next few years, but yes, we remain the first and only bank that does it.
Exactly. So when you create inspiration, other will follow. So to one of the last questions for the whole panel. So how do you adapt the product or services that you have today to meet the diverse need of your global customers? So essentially, how do you localize? So if we can start with Howard, think to understand how you actually localize, use the localized teams to to work with the products in different markets?
Yeah. We get this question a lot. Can you really understand your customer when your customer's in Australia and you're in Vietnam? I think a couple of answers to that. One is you do have to go the extra mile to create an affinity, an empathy, and an understanding of the customer. But lots of organizations do that. I mean, we just heard from Lego on stage earlier. I'm sure Lego have a way of, no matter where their products are designed or manufactured, of understanding Lego, the culture, the customer, and we certainly do that. So we do our very, very best to make, invest hugely in our office here to, make sure that it feels truly part of the Australian organisation as well as truly Vietnamese. We also, know that we have to go the extra mile to educate our software engineers about our customer. So we not only run a tech academy, we take next year or this year that we've just entered, we'll take 200 graduates on, but we also run a business academy where we're actually educating our Vietnamese software engineers and security specialists about our business, about our customer. We have a lot of travel back and forth, both Vietnamese colleagues to Australia and vice versa. So, you do have to go the extra mile, but I would say, our software engineers based in Australia are no closer to our customer than our software engineers here in Vietnam. You just have to make sure you create the right environment of learning and understanding.
Thank you, Howard. And I know from Vietcetera side, we have done a video called Spaces. So if you search Spaces Snap, you can find and see the amazing office that they have at the Hallmark in Ho Chi Minh City. Stephen, maybe you can tell a bit more on how you adopt the services to different markets. So as an example, you have some students that want to, let's say, get into the Ivy League schools in the US or have that as plan, but how do you adapt that to other markets as well?
Yeah, so I just, the way I think about it actually is a little bit different. I don't think about adapting what we do to local markets. Because in many ways our students are the same. Like if you're an ambitious Vietnamese student or a Chinese student or American student, you're all kind of trying to achieve the same outcome. But I think that actually the exact opposite, which is how do I be a place to work that anyone would want to work inside of, whether you're Vietnamese or Indian or American? And the way I think about that is, what are the standards of that? For us, it's you have to speak English at a certain level. Usually you attended a really great university. Maybe you worked at a place, like we have team members who are now doing their MBA at Stanford, or people who are working at McKinsey or BCG. We have one person who's going to HBS. So we just have like an amazing group. And then if you are Vietnamese and you're global, you say, yeah, I want to be a part of that. That's how I think about it more. Instead of saying, how do I become a great workplace for Vietnamese? I say, how do I become a place that anyone wants to work at? And then and this is for us, of course, like we're a very global company. So because we're global though, the thought is how do I build a globally exciting place to work, as opposed to how do I build a place in Vietnam that's specific for Vietnamese. That's a little bit how I think about it, and I think that's why our team is relatively global. So it's a little bit less of that localization. Actually, I think of it almost the exact opposite, where the talent that we get for a global company is attracted to the prospect of be working for a company that is global in its standards, maybe not as local actually in its standards. So that's a little bit how I think about it.
Thank you, Stephen. I think a lot of good insights shared about Lumiere education. I know one of the things today that we talked a bit about was R&D in Vietnam, the lack of R&D. So that leads me to the last question for Mark, because I know quite a lot about the company that you are managing today. So how do you work with R&D in terms of no waste? Because I know that you develop different products to market for markets nearby Asia, but also around the world as well. Mark, please.
We are selling about 50% to Europe and 50% to the US. So for us, it's about understanding the requirement from these two continents. Whatever we do now is regarding to think about ESG. It's a requirement for all businesses. And EUDR, if you do business in Europe. And the reason why I mention it is because we only do wooden furniture and some upholstery. So you really need to understand what requirements outside come into Vietnam. And for us, when we do R&D or we do production, we choose supplier and so on, we need to make sure that they fulfill this requirement because it's going to be the future. And if you don't know anything about it, you will not be able to export or sell any of your product in this, especially the US and Europe. So when we do R&D, we have a lot of, we have a whole team, technical team. We advise the customer, we advise our own mother company from the thickness of components to how you optimize in production and so on to save energy, to use less wood, because the wood we use, they're coming all the way from Europe, they come all the way from South America, and some of them will take 20, hundreds of years to grow up. So we also responsible using the materials, meaning for the waste, for example, offcut, we will use for heating up our boiler, and then we dry the wood. And sawdust, wood chip, we sell to local buyers, and they normally use for mushroom farming or for incense and so on. So we really try to use all of the wood to reduce our CO2 footprint.
That's amazing. And I know one of the panel a bit later is also about sustainability. So a lot more insight on how we work with sustainability in Vietnam today. But I think the last question, a quick one for me to you. Are you hiring today? And if you're hiring, where can our audience find a bit more information? So I know we have some QR codes that will come up on screen now. So how first, please?
We're always hiring. So yes, scan the QR code, go NAB Innovation Centre Vietnam, LinkedIn, Facebook, but not just traditional software engineers in Java or React, but solution architects, cybersecurity specialists, as well as, sort of quality engineers, so a whole range of roles.
That's amazing. So please scan the QR code. I know it will lead to the NAB career portal, so you can find out a lot more about the position that they're hiring today and also upcoming. Mark, next please.
Again, we also open up for any interest, people. And we don't have a specific position at this moment, but we open up for especially overseas Vietnamese because you do have some skills that we need here in Vietnam that we cannot find. So you're welcome to scan and send me a text or whatever.
Great. And Stephen, lastly, please.
Yeah, so I'm looking very specific. If you studied in US or Canada and you want to learn how to build, and you're interested in education, you want to build a bootstrap business, and you want to apprentice for 2 years before you build your own business, that's the person I'm looking for. So if that's you, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, or I guess scan this code, but I don't know where the code goes. I forgot. But, you can just message me.
Yes. Okay, so I just want to end this panel, say thank you to all panelists for sharing the stories, the inspiration, and most importantly, the business models that we don't always talk about today. So give a big round of applause for the panelists. And thank you guys.